Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 9th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the people we meet through the amazing story of coffee. I'm your host, David Crosby, founder and CEO of Rosso Coffee Roasters. Today's guest is Freda Yuan. Freda has won the UK Cup Tasters 3 times and is head of coffee at Origin Coffee Roasters in the UK. Freda and I had a wide-ranging discussion about her growth from barista to green coffee buyer. She gives us an overview of her methods of preparing to compete at Cup Tasters. And we chat about how and why she wrote her book on coffee tasting called Sip and Slurp, and how mindfulness underpins much of her life from competing to tasting coffee and dealing with mental health challenges she has faced. It was a great conversation with Freda, and I hope you enjoy it too. Hi, Freda. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to have you on.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
So let's talk a bit about your background. You've won the UK Cup Tasters Championships 3 times, and you've finished 3rd and 5th in the world. You just released a book, Sip and Slurp, Guide to Expert Coffee Tasting. You're a Coffee Masters judge. You have SCA certifications. You have an MBA. You're
making me nervous now.
No, your resume is stacked. But I'd love to get to the beginning of your coffee career. So how did you get into specialty coffee?
Good question. It's always the question people always ask me. And I found it's always one of the most exciting part to talk about, because jumping into specialty coffee, it's always something like, I'm so grateful now I'm be where I am right now. And then I love the community. And how I really started in coffee, I think I should say how I really started to notice it. So I started to drink coffee, back in Taiwan. I was one of the person I drink instant coffee, and I'm guilty for it, right? It's before specialty coffee, of course. But then I went to Australia. I work in Melbourne in cafes, and then that was the time when I did working holiday visa. From the past of my career, most of my time I work in hospitality. And so when I was in Melbourne, I work as waitress. So I've never, ever made coffee. But I was curious. I really enjoyed the culture. I really enjoyed the vibe, the energy in the cafe in Melbourne. Particularly, people come here for brunch, for food. And after my working holiday visa, I went home. And I really want to bring that vibe to Taiwan, to my hometown. Then I realized, okay, to learn about specialty coffee, maybe I should learn from the best, which I thought by that time was Australian. So I couldn't do anything anymore with my visa status. So I moved to London for another working holiday visa. And I worked for a Australian-owned cafe called Taylor Street Baristas. And that's when I started to learn how to make coffee. And that was 9 years ago already.
Okay, so you're in the UK.
Yeah.
You're a barista at this point?
Yeah. So went to UK, was a barista, and the training was really on point. So it's a really big cafe with, I think, 7 or 8 sides, and they're located in a city. So it's like busy, crazy busy, and the busiest time they could ever make like 1,600 coffees a day.
Oh, wow.
And it's like super crazy. And they have a really good education system. So you have to be able to make black coffee first, espresso. And then you have an exam, and then you can make milky coffee afterwards, and making latte art. And then you can serve, customers, and then greet customers. So it's a really full-on program. And I really enjoyed it to a degree that I feel I made enough coffee for the rest of my life, because 1,600 coffees a day. And imagine I worked for them for a year and a half.
Wow. This is a learning experience that you didn't want to open your own cafe and go back home?
That's exactly where I'm coming from. Yes, I'm like, this is just so much work. You can't go for holidays. What if you get sick and you have to, the retention is running really low sometimes because it's hospitality and a lot of young people coming in and out. I'm just like, I'm going to sit there forever taking care of my shop, and I have no life.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And then that's what I saw, like, for Chinese culture. it's more like, oh, if you don't know what to do, you study. So that's when I realized, okay, maybe I should move on, to learn something. And because I really enjoyed the cafe culture in London as well, particularly is a hub for all of the other European roasters, European cafes, and I can travel around. And the community was great. So I want to stay in London. And that's when I started to look into like study opportunities. And then I got a student visa for another 2 years. And that's where I get my MBA. And then after that, during my MBA, I was looking for sponsorship because I can't stay in UK permanently, right? And then that's what I need to find someone to get married, which was hard. Or I have to find a job sponsorship visa, right? And then it took me a while to find the right fit because it's coffee, it's hospitality. You can find someone to replace whatever you do, and then it's easy to find someone locally instead of hiring someone from overseas, paying a lot of money for them to do the job. So it was a struggle for me, but luckily someone saw my potential really, and then took me on. Those Caravan Coffee Roasters offered me a work visa sponsorship, and I stayed with Caravan for a while, and then Origin came along, offered me work visa, and then now here I am.
So you go from getting your MBA,
Yeah,
and you're a barista at this point, and at your current role, you're a green coffee buyer at Origin. So how do we make that transition in your career?
That's a very good question. While I realized I don't want to work as a barista anymore, I started to look into different options. And of course, the coffee career by then wasn't really, obvious. It's more like you have to try everything. So I volunteered in Norway, actually, in a roastery called Lippe. And I basically talked to the owner. I said, hey, can I just come here, work for you for a day or two? And they say yes. And then so I went to Norway. It's in Oslo, and I worked for them for 2 days, actually. And I worked in a roastery. And I learned that working in a roastery, actually, there's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of like repetitive work. And that's what I learned. I'm not a person that I like to do repetitive jobs, particularly production roasting and also packing and everything. And that's when my brain will go crazy because I'm a person I'm thinking a lot all the time. And if I keep doing the same thing, I would drive myself crazy. And so I realized, okay, I don't want to work in a roastery anymore. And so I started to look into sensory and then green coffee. And I did my Q grader when I was in Taiwan before my school.
Okay.
And then so by the time when I was looking for sponsorship, I already had my Q grader certification. So that in a way, it is a sort of like the certification to help me to, get a sponsorship because I have to prove to the government that I am good enough to be hired, right? And so then working at Caravan, I was a quality control manager for both roasted coffee and also green coffee. So that's when I started to get really into tasting different coffee and then how to take care of the quality control because that's where my passions lie on. Caravan by then was working closely with Raw Material, which is a green importer and exporter as well from Colombia and also in Rwanda. So I have access to the exporting type of business, and that's when my green coffee sort of like experience and knowledge started to expand while I was at Caravan. And to be fair, when I started to join Origin, I never really buy coffee because they're only limited by the time by a few origins, particularly Raw Material, because then I sort of like try to help Raw Material for their operation. They only ran 2 countries by then. So I was only buying either Rwandan coffee or Colombian coffee. But then Origin, if I remember correctly, we have 10 countries that we run with.
Wow.
And when I first joined, I was like, what am I doing? I don't know what's going on. And, I only bought 3 containers at Raw Material, but when my first year joining Origin, I bought 17 containers.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're just like, what the heck? This is just so completely different. And of course, it's a long learning curve because every day until even now, I'm still learning a lot of different things. But it's just really interesting to see like when I, on my transition from caravan raw material to origin, and then how dynamic has changed and how I have to push myself to face some situation that I never, thought about before. But it's been fun.
Would you recommend coffee professionals get training through, the Q grader course or the SEA, or do you think that's a good route, or more hands-on, join a company, work your way up the ranks, or could you do both?
I think it depends on what your personal trajectory you're looking at, right? For example, for me personally, I did SEA, I did Q grader. Part of the reason was because I needed a visa, right? So I need to be better, like, certification wise, I need to be better than other people to prove that I'm good enough. But it really depends. For example, if you already work in a roastery and you can have full on experience, why don't you just keep working on that direction?
Right.
The company you work for, or maybe the company people want to work for, it depends on whether they valued certification as well, right? So SEA course, to a degree, is very helpful, but I feel learning from experience actually makes me grow faster than ACA. But again, different module. It really depends. But for Q-graded course, I think to a degree, it's very helpful for me to communicate with the producers and also exporting company about what I want for my products. And yeah, so I think really like it depends what we want from our direction.
What does your day-to-day, maybe pre-COVID, look like buying for Origin, and now through COVID? I imagine travel's shut down, and it's very different.
Before COVID, believe it or not, I think in 2019 I visited 11 or 12 countries.
Wow.
And it's a little bit too much for me. But that was my first year, so I think that was needed. Day to day. So I'll go to the office and I started to roast some samples and taste some samples and decided sometimes which samples I would like to buy. Obviously, the roastery is big enough, so we do projection for every year. So my busiest season could be probably end of the year before Christmas, because I need to send out my contracts to our producers, and then they can produce during Christmas and January, and then the coffee will be shipped out by March, and then coffee land in June or May, sorry. And trying samples, and then projection, negotiation pricing, and then also sometimes deciding what coffee to which customers, because we have wholesale customers, we have bespoke coffee, and we have our retail cafes as well, and we have our online customers. So each customers require different coffee, and every time when I cup a table of coffee, I need to look into what coffee is suitable for espresso, what coffee is suitable for filter coffee, and think about how can I buy more from the producers as well. Because for me, it's more like if we can buy more coffee, the more contribution we can give back to the producers. So once the coffee is roasted, I will try to QC and taste how is the espresso like, and I will work with our roasters to fix the espresso for release, basically. And I work with the marketing to release the coffee, because each year we have every week we release one coffee, so 52 coffees a year already, and that's 86 plus coffee.
Wow.
And then we have espresso, and then we have customer bespoke coffee, so I can say maybe 70 coffees a year. And it's a lot. So you work with storytelling, releasing, what's the information, events. For example, we are releasing Chinese coffee for end of January because it's Chinese New Year. So you're working on events, the coffee that could match the events or festival. So yeah, and working with education, wholesale and retail training, and etc. etc. There's a lot. I actually do mostly everything, and yeah, that's very intense to be fair.
2019, is there a country you went to or a moment on the farm that you can kind of reflect back on and, purchasing that coffee or talking to a producer that could maybe give a little story?
The most experience I had that was still with me was when I visited Ethiopia. I don't know, I've never been there. To be fair, I never thought I would visit Africa in my life because it's always like, oh, I want to come to Europe, America. And so Africa is sort of like never expect what it could be. It's just a country. It's still a bit developing, but very backward as well. And there was no road and outstretch outside of Addis, of course. Have you been to Ethiopia?
No, just Rwanda. Well, in Burundi, I guess.
It's very raw. So there was nothing, there's no road, there's no proper road, there's no like concrete road, and then it's all red dust. So you drive through, but you'll be like really bumpy all the time. And then while we drive through the village or on the road, you look at their houses, and some are very sort of like not well equipped, or there are many rubbish on the floor, or the kids doesn't wear shoes, or they didn't have enough clothes. And I remember the exporter by that time took me to a water spring. And there were kids that carried the yellow bucket, the very famous yellow bucket, and then to the water stream and then pick up water. But the road was not road, it's just mud, So it's really muddy. And then mostly it's kids who carry those like trolley and then, the bucket to collect water. But the condition was not great for them to easily access to those, facilities or maybe the stream. And then of course I was the only Asian, in that area. People all come to see me, and they would look at me, and they're mostly kids, of course, and of course adults as well. But you feel that some kids, they look happy, they were really happy, but you can just tell they would need maybe more help in healthcare or, their clothes, or, I just feel so much. I just hope that I can help them or support them within whatever resources I can, because I feel like to a degree I'm so privileged. I have a place to stay, I have heaters, clean water to drink, and then enough food, but then that's something they don't have. And that's sort of like inspired me of wanting to work with those producers, or maybe countries who will need more support in buying quality coffees, sort of like through buying coffee and contribute back to the society. I don't know. I feel like the more country I visited, the more I feel I have more empathy towards people, towards situation. And I never thought I would become like this type of person, but I always have a lot of love anyway. But I just never know it would transform to this type of love,
Yeah, I agree. It's super powerful to see and go to these countries, and it can really change you, especially getting outside of our bubble here in the UK or Canada or various other places. So you're a green coffee buyer. It's like a highly desirable role. Is there some training that you would recommend people do to like transition to that role, or what can people do to, I don't know, further their career? Because 80% always say that's the role I want. I want to be a green coffee buyer. I want to be on the road. Do you have any recommendations for them? What they can do to train their palate? Obviously, we're going to get into your book that's going to talk about that. But
I think for me was keep cupping. So my career was for my roasting and then green coffee career, firstly was working in a roastery and then quality control roasted coffee. So I sort of understanding the roasting profile and most of that taste, the defects of the roasting. And then I started to work more towards to green coffee. And then I started to identify green coffee defects. So what we can do is trying to focus on those type of cupping. When firstly, for example, today I'm cupping something. What is my agenda? My agenda is to identify roasted defects, or can I roast different? How can I roast my coffee differently? Or today, my agenda is to trying different green coffee, based on their terroir and also the green coffee defects. I remember long time ago, it was when I was barista actually, we actually did a very educational cupping. It's about tasting pheno. It was just, a cupping, and then there was the bike coffee with pheno. And for me, it tastes like oyster or like seafood.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. And then it's always in my head. So I learn, the green coffee defect from that cupping, and then it's always carried with me. And obviously, it's not easy to assess, but then maybe talk to exporters or your roasters, and then trying to get some green coffee. So that's what I would recommend. And I think Q Grader actually is a good course to challenge yourself in terms of how much in terms of your sensory abilities. But I guess Q Grader is good at tasting your ability, which potentially it's all being able to trained by, but it doesn't really mean it gives you more green coffee training. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's pretty hard, but I guess I'll come back to, you just have to keep cupping, trying your best, and then, buying different coffee and trying. And if you're able to go to like importers cupping session, that would be a good sort of like way to talk to other people who are handling green coffee more.
I think that's great advice. The roadmap in coffee is not straight and linear, kind of, it's all over the place. And training for some people works really well. Certification works well for others. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a different way of looking at it from different perspectives. So could we maybe spend a moment, you're talking about cupping a lot. Could you talk about cup tasters? What that is? Our audience has some non-coffee people, so they might not know what cup tasters actually means. And then how do you go on to win 3 times in the UK? That's very impressive.
So Cup Taster is a competition. It's like a coffee Olympic Games. Can you say that?
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of athletes are trying different categories. And my categories is about tasting coffee. It is a competition about accuracy and then speed. So it's a table of coffee with 8 sets of coffees, and each set has 3 coffees. 2 are identical, 1 is different. And the competitor needs to pick the different one out from the set. And the competition is about 8 minutes. For example, David, if you get 7 correct out of the 8 sets, and I got 7 correct out of the 8 sets, but you finish earlier than I do.
I don't think that would happen, but I might go 1 for 8.
Never say never. Impossible is nothing. That's what I believe. But then, for example, if you got 7 out and I got 8 out, doesn't matter about the time, and then I win. So that's the rule. What I really like about it is there's no judges. You get the answer straight away. But what that means is it's super nerve-wracking when people are revealing the answer of the cup.
So what does training look like for you? How do you train for cup tasters? You don't have to reveal all your secrets, but a few.
Thank you. I do have my trade secret. I basically started to do competition training. So everything is competition prep. And what that means is the time, the coffee, the mindset of it. I would taste a lot of fruits, a lot of anything really. Because for me, sensory training, not just for competition, but overall in general, is about living our life. Whether I pay attention to my life, whether I pay attention to what I eat, whatever. And so I would prepare, for example, 5 grapes, 5 different variety of grapes, and just taste each grapes and identify the differences. Or apple, or sometimes you can drink wine, olive oil. So that's one of my line of training. And then there's mental training, because obviously the one I just said before was more physical training, but mental training is super important as well. For me, it is particularly hard because, like I said before, I think a lot in my head. So I can create a lot of scenarios that could probably never happen before in my head, but it made me stop from being great. So I started to look into maybe more positive quotes, or trying to change my mindset of not looking at things. For example, you say, oh, that probably could never happen. straight away I have an awareness saying, well, you shouldn't say that, because if you believe in that word, then it will never happen. I'm trying to change my way of thinking. I manifest a lot. Even though I manifest, I'm going to be 2021 World Cup tasting champion, and it never happened. But I still, did it because it is something, in a way, it gives more positive energy to myself. Other than that, I did a training that it's sort of like performance training, because sometimes when we are on stage, everyone is nervous, right? One of my training was make myself nervous. I would train the tasting sets in the cafe. So there will be people watching or walking around. So
that's super smart.
Yeah. So like it's anything that you can simulate to the competition vibe.
And then at Worlds, do you find that coffee steps up in difficulty, or just people are faster and more accurate? What's the jump from UK to Worlds?
I honestly think UK was harder.
Oh, wow.
But I can't judge it much, because another thing for me when I compete is I only focus the moment. So I focus on that set, picking up the wrong one, and then the minor differences among the cups. And then I let go. And I move on to the next set, and I focus, and I let go. So in a way, like I probably did super well in the Worlds, but I was slower. But then when I did the UK, and then I probably was quicker. I can't remember, but basically it's hard to compare, because every round, every set by different people is always different. So I try to not create another barrier of me, this is harder, or, like preconception about things.
Your reaction when you get it right is utterly amazing.
Oh, thanks. Because it's quite boring, isn't it?
Well, no, it's fast and dynamic. And
yeah,
it's like you said, you get the results very quickly versus barista competition. There's judges, they go in the back, they talk, and someone can have a very great looking presentation but score very poorly, and then it's hard for people to understand that, or vice versa. They have a okay presentation but they score very well because the coffee tasted well. Where cup tasters, it's right or wrong. There's no interpretation, which is in a way almost better.
No, yeah, you're right. But also the reason I got so excited about it, and I would sometimes, of course, I always shake my hand when I try to reveal the answer. But sometimes I want to bring more dynamic. I want to, sometimes I host cup taster as well, right? And I want to bring more dynamic to the entire presentation, because I want people to look into it and say, oh, what are you guys doing? And then, this competition should be really, really fun and should be joyful. But sometimes it can get really quiet. And that's why sometimes I'm just I'm going to cheer. And then I enjoy dancing as well. So, it works well both ends.
Are you thinking anything? Because they have 3 cupping bowls. You lift up the one you think is not the same. And then if there's a dot on it, that means you're correct. Is anything going through your mind? Are you thinking, positive thoughts to this cup and that's the right one? Or is your mind, are you in meditation mode and you're not thinking anything?
It's more yes, I got this. And it is also a boost of, I can do this. So it's more of a positive thinking, yeah. Or I can't believe I got it right sometimes. It happened, because I forgot most of the sets, like I said, right? I'm just,
right.
Yeah, this is great. I'm happy I got it.
This podcast is sponsored by Rosso Coffee Roasters. You can check out the home coffee plan subscription on the website, www.rossocoffeeroasters.com. This week's subscription coffee is from Chiapas, Mexico, from the Cup of Excellence winning farm called Santa Cruz. It's a naturally processed coffee, and it's just outstanding. I'm drinking a cup of it right now, and to me it tastes like stewed blackberries and a bit of milk chocolate. Enjoy sipping on some Santa Cruz while listening to my chat with Freda. So let's transition maybe into your book. So you released it in 2021. How did you go down the road of wanting to write a book? Where did that idea start from?
It came from my second win from UK Cup Tasting Champion. When I won, and none of my colleague was with me, because the competition is in Manchester, and it was on Saturday it was on Sunday. So my colleagues are mostly in in London. So no one ever traveled up with me. And then so mostly me competing on my own, training on my own. And suddenly I feel, oh, what am I doing? I tried so hard to compete and I won, but then I feel quite lonely to a degree that my life was involved with competition all the time. I've dedicated so much to it. And suddenly I reached that point, and what's next? What's my next goal? Because I already reached my goal. And I was really confused. So I talked to my friend, and she actually recommended that, oh, why don't you write a book about it, about your sensory abilities or skills, whatever. But initially I was like, well, who would want to read my book? And I don't think I could. I never think I would be a writer. I would never think I would be a published author, And then I thought about it. I did some market research, actually, because through my coffee career, learning about coffee, learning about sensory, there are a few books, and it's like academic books, and it's super thick and super heavy. And to me, it's a barrier because English is not my first language. Reading that book, it mostly slows me down, even though I own one book, and then, it never pushed me to read more. It's never a really easy book to teach you how to taste coffee. And when I was a barista asking people, how do we improve our sensory abilities? And people would just say, oh, you taste more coffee. You just keep tasting. But what does that really mean? It can mean so many things, right? And I realized that we are missing something to show people how easy this is, and then how easy we can learn about sensory and how easy we can improve. That's where it all come from. That's why I started to, draft my topics and then think about how to put everything together. And for me, everything needs to be approachable. I'm a person for roasting coffee, for buying coffee, for also writing the book. It has to be approachable so I can reach out to more people who could enjoy coffee more, right? And then so I make it easier, but also because my language ability is simpler. So eventually I wrote a book. Initially I published on the internet because I couldn't find a publisher to help me to publish it, because it is also a memoir. It's like talking about myself and then my personal experience. So it's not very, coffee textbooks. So I couldn't find a publisher to publish for me. So then I thought, well, gathering more information about publishing, it's very complicated. Why not? I can try it myself because I have space, I have storage. And then, so I did it. I never published a book, as you might already know, because I work in coffee, but I become a project manager, and I did it during COVID time because I was on furlough. So I become a project manager. I hired my designer from freelance websites, photographer. I found it from my friends as well. They're freelance. And then I eventually put everything together.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long did it take to write the book and then release it?
The book finished, I can't remember. The book finished 4 years ago. But because I wasn't trusting myself, and I wasn't sure whether people want to read it, or, I couldn't find a publisher. So it was in my back burner for 3 years until I was on furlough. And I thought, okay, I really want to do this because the most important thing for me is to share about we should all enjoy our moment, every moment in our life. And through enjoy every moment in our life, we can increase our sensory awareness that can enhance our coffee tasting abilities. And I want to share this. Eventually, once I confirmed, it took me 6 months to get the book print.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you have a meditation practice? You always talk about mindfulness and being in the moment.
I do.
We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. I started this practice. It's called Ziva meditation that I encountered back in 2019 when I first started to work for Origin. And I've done it since then. Every day, twice a day, 15 minutes per session. It is a meditation. It's designed for busy people, but it's super, super powerful. My life has changed. My perspective have changed. And I feel I can easily monitor my negative thoughts and then get back on track. And it is 3 parts, this meditation. The first part is mindfulness. So more like awareness of my nose, my mouth, and my hand. And then there will be mantra, and then there'll be manifesting. Yeah, so 3 parts, and then 15 minutes per session.
So when you're drinking a cup of coffee, could you run our listeners through what you would be thinking about and maybe how you would deconstruct it? I think for a lot of non-coffee professionals, hearing blueberries or this tastes, like rhubarb seems very magical or far-fetched. And I think someone like you might be able to break it down in a really simple way, that the way I could practice at home when I'm having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, firstly, the flavor notes for me, sometimes it's a hit and miss, because when I first came to UK, I never had rhubarb before. Like, we don't grow rhubarb in Taiwan.
Right.
Or blueberry. Like, what the heck is that? I went to UK and then just like everyone talk about flavor notes. I'm like, what the heck? For me, I found, again, like, I feel things needs to be sort of like deconstruct, more approachable, so people can feel more related to. And that's where, when I wrote my book, Sip and Slurp, I have more of a deconstruction of most of the information. Basically, when I started to drink a coffee, I firstly, I'll smell the coffee. And that doesn't mean I might smell anything. It doesn't matter. It's more like, telling my body and my nose, I'm starting to drink something. And it's like warming up your sensory. And then when I first have a sip, I will look into maybe the body, the mouthfeel of the coffee. And obviously, if you don't understand most of the descriptions about how to describe the quality of the drink, you might just think, it tastes like coffee. Which is fine, because it takes time to learn and gain those abilities and experience to describe those feelings, and then so you can drink the coffee and then see how's the body like, and maybe it's like really thick, like milk, creamy, the texture like milk, and then or maybe it's really thin, like water, I guess. Or skin milk. And so you can really to identify the weight and then the mouthfeel of the drink. And then you can maybe identify the acidity of the drink. So acidity can be really, really sharp or really, really mild or delicate. Just so comparing to, for example, you bite lemon or you bite grapefruit or you bite orange. So there are different intensity of the acidity. So just be mindful about how's the intensity of those, attributes. And it doesn't really matter if you can identify, how's the quality or whatsoever. I think it's more like one step at a time. Maybe today, my focus is I am going to identify the body, the weight, the mouthfeel of this coffee. That's it. And tomorrow I will identify the acidity. You don't have to put everything together. But once you are well trained, it's like when you're riding a bicycle. Firstly, you have another 2 wheels behind your bicycle. But once you're so well trained, you can remove those 2 wheels, right? It always takes time. But then understanding the structure of it, and then start from the first thing, the easiest thing, maybe body, and then move on. And then that will help you to build up the entire, structure.
Do you think vocabulary is an important part of us as coffee professionals talking on what is acidity, what is considered bitterness? Or is that not as important as some perceive, that we all have to be on the same page on what those things mean?
It's very important for the professionals who works in coffee roasting or green coffee side. For example, we're talking about pear. Have you tried pear before in your life? Do you have pear in Canada?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, pears are good.
Okay. We have pear in Taiwan too, but my pear is your so-called Asian pear.
Right.
Your pear is my so-called Western pear. And when you talk about just pear, you talk about your thing and I talk about my thing, but not knowing we're talking about different things until we chat about our vocabulary, even though it's the same word. And then only until we sort of like maybe meeting together and then we taste both different fruits, understanding actually both pears are so drastically different. Your pear is more syrupy, my pear is more crisp and then watery. And then you realize, okay, this is actually different things. And those type of vocabulary is super important for defects, for roasting particularly, and also for coffee buying. So yeah, it's very, very important.
I want to transition back a little bit to your book. So you've written about depression and bulimia. If you're comfortable talking about it, what did mindfulness and meditation, how did that help you kind of transition through that in that time in your life?
Yeah, I'm always comfortable to talk about it because it is my goal to share as much as I can to raise the awareness about having depression, bulimia, or any other sorts. It's not a crime. It's not a taboo. It's just something we all easily to get in different transition of life. For me, mindfulness, the power of now is super important from my recovery from depression and bulimia. And also very important for me to taste coffee. My first realization when I realized these both are connected together was when I was having a coffee exam for dialing in a decaf coffee. Now, people might judge, oh, decaf coffee doesn't taste good whatsoever. But no, my decaf coffee, the coffee I made was so good. I didn't realize decaf coffee can be so sweet, so chocolatey, so caramel. And that's based on my taste. And then so when I taste coffee, I pay so much attention. When I taste that decaf coffee, and then when I try to dial in, I put so much effort and pay so much attention, which attention can transfer to my mindfulness. Attention can transfer to mindfully tasting. And when I noticed it, I realized, okay, so because when I have bulimia, I would purge, and then the acid from the stomach will sort of like burn my palate. And that means my palate would be wiped out and everything I taste was tasteless until my palates regrow in 2 weeks after. So when I taste that decaf coffee, I realized, oh, I can taste coffee, firstly. But secondly, maybe I should stop hurting myself because if I keep doing that, I won't be able to taste coffee. And that's when I first realized, okay, this is so powerful. And I started to transfer that skills by every bite I eat. Every bite I eat slowly. I try to identify the texture, the combination of the flavor. And in the beginning was more like I would chew 30 times per bite.
Wow.
Yeah, this was because it is for my bulimia, because I want to slow down my eating so I wouldn't stuff myself and feel, oh, this is not enough. I want to eat more. But then 30 times per bite, it started to slow me down. And when I started to put more attention to it, I realized, wow, there's so much combination and so much layer when I eat everything. And that's when I started to really look into this, and I learned that, and I realized that the power of now being aware, meditation, being mindful, and being there, it helps me to firstly taste coffee better, being better at sensory skills as well, but also like it helps me to live and enjoy my life more. Like maybe having dinner with my friends, I probably won't pay more attention on my phone. I'll pay more attention to our conversation, but also while I'm eating, I'll pay a lot of attention as well. So I am fully 360-degree aware of everything that's around me, and I'm present.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
More than welcome.
Maybe a follow-up question is, how do you deal with doubt? Mm-hmm. Those kind of underlying questions now that maybe in your 20s was harder to deal with?
That's a very good question, because I still have doubt every single day. It's not like, oh, I meditate now and I'm in light the rest of my life. Right. It's not. It will always come, all of this dark time and, all of the experiences, And firstly, I suppose we need to understand what does doubt means. Like, it's like questioning, right? But why we question? what does questioning mean? Sorry, this is so deep right now. But it's more like, why do we create these questions? The reason we have questions is because of unknown, right? Because we are unsure what's going to happen, because there's uncertainty, and those uncertainty and unsure creates fear, right? So if we understand how the process of what does that mean by doubts and what that creates, and suddenly you're like, okay, so you can ask the question, why am I afraid of? Right? For me, for example, when I was doing my book, I have so much question about myself. Like, who would want to read my book? How many prints should I print? Because, like, what if I'm wasting all my money? And obviously, those are legitimate questions. But to some degree, I really sort of like believe that this will be a good sort of like outcome, or I can say I trust the process. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad, but I believe the process, and I don't know what it's going to be. It might be negative, positive, but I just have to trust it. So I just keep going one step at a time, and until I finished it, I realized that I can do anything I want, because this is the mindset that, I don't have to be really negative. I don't have to doubt about things. I could say, I don't know what's going to happen, because doubt is a negative word. It can be a negative term. Maybe I can just say this thing, and I'm going to move towards to this thing, and then we'll reveal the answer in the end without judging, questioning, and then eventually the outcome could be unexpected because we didn't have any doubts anyway, right? So it is something that I try to work on the mindset, and that will be super helpful for doubts. And then I feel, when I was young, no one ever taught me about this. I never, really read any books or whatsoever to guide me through it. And then now I've experienced so many sort of like monitoring my personal awareness. Sometimes I would say, I can't do this. But then suddenly there's another Freda say, that's bullshit. You definitely can do it. Right? So identify that, and then so remove all of those uncertainty or doubts can help me to move forward, even though the future is unknown.
That's a great answer. Okay, Freda, I got to be mindful of your time. So we're going to shift to a few personal questions and then wrap up. How much coffee do you drink a day?
Oh my God, people are going to hate me. Because of my meditation, I become super sensitive with my body type. I sort of stop drinking coffee only when I work.
Okay.
Or in the morning, I'll have a flat white, but rarely, maybe once a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 1 or twice a week, yeah.
Okay. Other than if you're cupping and everything else.
Yeah. Please don't hate me, guys.
No. What does rest look like for you?
Rest? Like overall outside of work, you mean?
Yeah. How do you recharge? How do you reset?
I think meditation. So if it's short term, it's meditation. For me, my second meditation in a day, it's normally in the afternoon. It's like a powerful nap. And so for me, it's super, super powerful. But if it's holidays, I think not thinking about work and then traveling, climbing the mountains, hiking is super, super helpful for me.
What's one thing that you believe in that few others in the industry would agree with?
Oh my God, would agree. This is a tough question.
Take your time.
Because most of the time, people wouldn't agree what I said.
That's good. You can give examples.
Ooh, I think anaerobic process is going away.
Oh, wow. Why is that?
They would agree, right?
Maybe explain what the process is and then why you think it's going to go away.
So anaerobic process is like a very special prep. So producers will put coffee cherries in a bucket and then close the bucket, and then so the air cannot get in, and then only CO2 comes out from the bucket, and it become like the heat fermentation process that will change the taste of the coffee. And I personally feel it's going away, either potentially I don't buy that much of coffee from anaerobic process. Or I do think that it was a trend, and it is still a trend, but I think it's dying down because it takes a lot of effort and time for coffee producers to produce that coffee, and there's more money for them to invest. And now if the coffee producers are super small and they want to follow the trend, but that doesn't mean they have enough money to invest, and they probably don't have a knowledge of it. But once they invest all of that effort and resources, the buyer doesn't buy it, or no one wants to buy that coffee. And I think that's a waste for them. Yeah, but that's just my personal thought about this.
Do you see a new trend coming in processing?
There is a new trend about infusing coffee with different fruits at the moment. But that's not the direction for me for buying coffee. For me, I think it's more like terroir, still, variety. What
does your morning routine look like?
Oh, wow. This is a weird podcast. Okay, so I woke up in the morning. The first thing I would do, tongue scraping.
Oh, wow.
You're like, what the heck is that? So it's a practice for my meditation, and it's a Ayurveda practice. So over the night, your body creates a lot of toxic, and it all come up to your tongue. So I use tongue scraper to remove all of that. It's bitter. It's like bitter and acidic matters, white matters. And then I remove that. And then I'll drink a glass of lemon water with some raw honey. So it's another Ayurveda practice. And then meditation. So those are like my solid routine every morning.
Nice. Where can people find your book?
So people can find my book from my website. It's Freda, FredaYuan.com. Other than that, I have some few distributors. I don't know if Russell...
8 ounce has it, but they're
8
sold.
ounce. Thank you very much.
They're sold out.
But they sold out.
So I'll bug them.
Okay.
I'll bug them.
Yeah, do bug them. Thank you.
And where can people find you online?
You can find me online at my Instagram. I'm Freda. I am Freda.
Okay. Thanks so much for chatting with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Into great meditation.
A lot of weird questions. Yeah.
No, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Freda.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, look at that. You've made it. Thanks for listening to By the Drip. If you could please subscribe, rate, and give us a comment, that'd mean the world to me. Till next time.